Part of this meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee. Are we recording? So this is a meeting that's open to the public and it is being recorded. Before we start, there are one or two, bearing in mind that half of us are, this is only your second meeting, I'm not sure you'll know all the officers. Could Edwina and is Mark up there? Just introduce themselves. Edwina is the monitoring officer. I don't think everybody will have met, which is no reply. Could you just introduce yourself, Edwina, please? Thank you. And for those who don't know, sitting at the end of the table is Mark Hodson, who's the external auditor, who's joining us today, particularly for the improvement item. And then we have next to him is...
Yes, hello, Angela Covert. I'm the interim director for transformation, so supporting the chief executive on the improvement programme.
Okay. And the interim chief executive, Gordon, is joining us online. Okay. We are fully quorate, no apologies. May I ask members whether they have a disclosable interest for any items on the agenda? No disclosable interest, thank you. Chair's announcement. I'll just have one that just to say, and I'll come back to it in the when we deal with the improvement plan item, is that I had an online meeting yesterday with DLUC. I spoke with the Deputy Director, Local Government Stewardship, and his team. So I'll be able to report back on that when we get to the improvement item. That was my only announcement. So that takes us to item 3, which are the minutes of the previous meeting and the action log. Are we happy with the minutes as a record? Do I need a proposal? We're content. It's an accurate record. Okay. So if we could move to the action log. To see what it is we said we'd do or would be done. I'm just looking at the, I don't know whether anybody got any comments. I'll just take us through. On page 11 of 133, there are a couple of open items which I don't think need comment at this stage. But if we go down to the last page, which is 13, there are a couple of, I don't know whether they're fossils or something we need to discuss. So we've got at the top of that page marked as minute 6.9, the monitoring officer to update the committee on the progress of externally commissioned work being carried out on HR policies. I don't know whether could officers say, is this still an outstanding item?
Good morning. Yes, this is still an outstanding item. I've taken it upon myself to chase this up. I believe that piece of work has now been completed and the draft has been reviewed by HR. So that is an item that can come, obviously be added to your work programme to come to your next meeting.
For information.
Yep.
Thank you. For information. Thank you, Jodie. Going down. There's a development session to be arranged for next year on financial strategies. And we did agree when we first reached the stage that we're of the departure of the previous chief executive and the findings which were reported to us generally about the that led to the improvement plan, that we would consider the lessons for us as a committee in 6 months' time. That's how we phrased it, which is the in the action plan. I wonder if anybody has any thoughts how we should think about that, or have I lost the plot? I think I've lost the plot. No, here we go. Draft annual report, item at the bottom of the page, 14.5. So we did discuss the need to sort of look inward about why or what we could learn from the things that are happening in the combined authority, and that we, at that time, said scheduled for December. Do we want to wait a bit, or would we like? What would we like? To look at this idea maybe in 3 months, in January, February, March, something like that, because it's still developing a lot. I don't know.
Well, I'd be happy to wait, but equally, I don't see there's any harm in us beginning to talk about it in December, even if we don't finalise it in December, because there may be some outstanding matters that we need officers or individuals to look at.
Okay, so that's cake and eat it then, Graham, is it? Any other comments? Okay, well, I don't know whether this might be best done as a development session. Our first, maybe a 3/4 of an hour development session online to try and tease out some of the bits that we might wish to focus on, rather than ask officers to do an analysis for us at this stage. Do people have any preferences or thoughts?
Is that okay? Yeah, thank you. Just reading through the agenda papers, it's clear that there are numbers of matters which this committee hasn't attended to, but should have attended to, needs to attend to. And was reflecting on all of this, and I think there needs to be kind of a review of actually the work that we undertake. We need to be assured that we're fit for purpose of carrying out our role, and that the officers are supporting us in that. I think there have been some. I think there's a lot of wheels on this ship, and I think there's been a lot of people asleep at the wheel on this ship. And I don't think that's particularly the fault of particular individuals. I think it's a matter of problems of not having enough staff or the appropriate staff in place to do the jobs. And I think unless we have a helicopter view about what we're doing, and all the systems are in place to support this committee to fulfil its job, I think that is what's needed, because then I would feel more confident that this committee can do its job. And as a member of this committee, I'm uncertain as to whether or not we can do our job properly at this point. So I think a review of that nature would be very timely, and I think we need to demonstrate that, like, we're putting our own house in order as part of the overall improvement plan, because we're an essential part of the governance infrastructure. And I think actually the same might apply to our sister committee too.
Thank you. Any other comments? That's a pretty damning statement. Could you give some examples of that are in your mind where the big weaknesses are?
Well, we'll pick them up as we go through the agenda papers, but it's in the auditor's report, isn't it? Where for example, the whole panoply of governance arrangements around the subsidiary companies, for example, is not just specific to this committee, but it actually appears to be systemic across the whole organisation. And it seems that it was the governance of those subsidiary companies was the responsibility of everybody, but the responsibility of no one. So that's one glaring example of that. But I haven't haven't done a research project into this, Chair, but if you want me to, I can go through all, take some time. But I think we have to accept.
Well, I think it might be helpful if we just go back to the subsidiary companies. I think I don't think I would agree with that analysis. This is something that the committee set out as a priority to understand more than a year ago, and we commissioned the work which has now been done, and we have rejected our terms of reference and have them revised to make it more appropriate. We've had some very thorough debates. So whilst it is of great concern to my mind the state in which the management and oversight of the subsidiary companies are concerned, I'm not sure I would pass that into a inadequacy in this committee in trying to gain an understanding. And I think I would draw the distinction between the two. I think there are other areas where we might, I don't know. But if you'd like to let us have a list of the items where you think that there are big weaknesses in the committee that need to be resolved, I think that would be helpful. I should also perhaps, in this, it would, for 3 years I tried to ask members of the committee to provide their skill sets. And for 3 years, I never got a reply. And I think it would be helpful in things like that, where we could understand our skills and identify our training. So I'm not suggesting that there aren't things to be learned and there are weaknesses, but I think the example you chose as your lead example the evidence doesn't bear out what you say.
If helpful, obviously been involved in some of the previous conversations. It's an opportunity, I think, as well for the committee to reflect on what are the barriers in place or have been in place that are preventing you from acting as an efficient committee, rather than actually focusing on whether you as committee members have done what you feel you should have done. And I would then sort of draw your attention to, obviously, the review of governance that points out some areas that could be potentially explored, not just for this committee, but all for the overview and scrutiny function. And of course, previously as a committee, we've come along, we've spoken to you about issues regarding member behaviour, the code of conduct, the need for a member officer protocol, and some of the information that was shared, shall we say, by the combined authority or wasn't shared by the combined authority in informing you of some of those matters that were ongoing. So a lot of this is to do with those barriers potentially that are in play that have prevented you from acting as an effective committee previously. And I think there's definitely scope within your work programme and with the improvement framework work going on to be involved in, for example, when developing the approach to performance management or risk management, interacting effectively with this committee so you can clearly state this is what we need from the organisation, and we can remove some of those barriers that have been in existence in the sharing of information, the raising and escalation of issues that we've identified in the review of governance previously as that has been an issue.
Thank you, Judy. I think to do this in an analytical way is, as Simon said, but there are some standard formats which we've used before, I think, and to analyse our performance against the requirements of an audit committee. Perhaps that would be a good starting place to put that out, both for each member to make a view as to where he thinks we fit, and with that and our terms of reference to bring some officers to bring something back to the next meeting that shows that analysis of where the weaknesses might be. And if I could ask officers to go out again to membership, we have a very simple format to ask our individual skill sets. So it's I've had budget experience, I've had audit committee experience, I'm an accountant, that sort of thing. Because I think the two things play together. We don't get better unless we know both where we're weak as a committee and where we perhaps need some more training, because I have hitherto rather like a jackdaw collected the bits of training because we haven't had an analytical approach. So, and then we could take a view in December as to what we learn out of that. Would we be happy with that? Or we do need to get better. I wasn't just because I got hurt by that one particular example you chose, which is inappropriate. That doesn't mean we don't have to, because we do need to understand why we didn't understand some of the things that that we now know. And I have made the point frequently in the governance review to London this week that it isn't easy with an audit committee which sits outside the organisation to understand the texture and the granularity. So we do, one of the obstacles that we haven't got, whether there's a need to do more about getting closer or there's a way in, or we just have to accept it as it is. I think these are discussions for another day. Are we happy with that?
Very happy with that, Chair, thank you. I didn't mean it wasn't it was a generalised matter, not to be taken personally.
It was a generalised matter, not to be taken personally, or a sort of rebuke, generalised rebuke. It was actually just like saying, at the moment, I have a sense of discomfort with where we sit with things, and we've had those conversations separately too.
And I fully agree that it wasn't a personal thing.
Yeah,
It was just, I think members have tried very hard on those subsidiary companies to make progress. And it wasn't an inadequacy in the part of the committee, in my opinion.
You got it wrong, Chair. Imtiaz. Just to follow up on that, subsidiary companies, there's one of the, I think it's on the risk register, one of the subsidiary companies was repeatedly failing to provide business cases, business plans, financial forecasts. And I think that's a fundamental failing of a subsidiary company. But I can't understand, obviously I wasn't part of the combined audit committee last year, but I can't understand how that would have gotten through the cracks unless, of course, we're sat around this room not expecting, not knowing what to expect, and then not being furnished with that information to say, we have a subsidiary company and we should have provided you with financials and we haven't. And in the absence of that information, I don't know how we as a committee would be able to challenge that, because without our own personal experiences in the world of business, we wouldn't expect the subsidiary companies to come out with a business case necessarily. So is it a case of we didn't know what we should be expecting, that's why we didn't ask the questions, or was it clearly in front of our face and we just didn't challenge?
Well, we will be coming back to it when we do the internal auditors report, but I think it was a learning journey if I look back at last year. And it started off with, it wasn't in our terms of reference. And we asked for it to be in terms of reference, and that took 2 meetings because the first time around we didn't feel it was quite appropriate. And we made the internal audit of the subsidiary companies part of the work plan. We asked for that, and I'd expressed my concern about them when I have reported out the annual committee's report to the board, and that had made it clear over a year ago in our report that a priority for us as a committee was to get our minds around what this was all about. And today we will have the first product which answers your the points you made, Timitas, because we're actually going to get underneath and see where we are. And we know from reading when we get to that item, it's not good. Sorry, David Brown.
Thanks, Chair. I was going to leave it to the agenda item, but I think part of the, if I could put some minds at rest, and I suspect your memory is playing you up a little bit because it's more than a year ago, a lot more than a year ago, that we started asking for financial information about the subsidiary companies. And if I could just use the word drift, it just seems to have drifted, because we've asked for it, we've been told it would come to the next meeting, it didn't, and it's just gone on and on and on. So we have tried, but the information hasn't been forthcoming.
Okay, I think we probably, Edwina, the interim monitoring officer, would like to say a few words, and I think maybe we'll go back to subsidiary companies when we get to the item on the agenda. Edwina, please. No, thank you, Adina. I'm sorry, we've had our sandwiches early for whatever the item was, number 6. So when we get to number 6, can we please bear all this in mind without repeating those aspects? But this is the purpose of an action plan. It's to remind you what you said you were going to do, and to there we go. So that was a little insight. And the other thing on the action plan, and I'd be interested in members' and officers' advice, was we were going to have a development session on project management, and that twice was postponed for unavoidable reasons. Would we continue to like a development session on project management? And if we did, do we see it something that we need soon, or would the new year be right? So first question, would we continue to like a development session on project management? David.
Thank you, Chair. I think it would be useful, but more importantly, it needs to focus on what our role as a committee is in project management. I don't see us as project managing, but we need that assurance that projects are being managed properly, and it's how we go about that.
Thank you. Any other bearing in mind everything else that's going on in the new year?
We also talked earlier about financial management development, and for me that is slightly more important than project management, because I've done project management in the past. Whether we can combine them together in one slightly longer development session in the new year or not, I don't know, but I'd certainly like to see a bit more about financial management in the combined authority first.
Okay, thank you. Could I ask officers to take those 2 points away, that in the new year, and if we can, if they can be in tandem, that would make diary management easier. And if we could have a date in the action plan, or a proposed date and a way forward in the action plan for the next meeting, that would be helpful. Any other comments on the action plan? No, thank you. We now move on to the improvement framework, which I understand the Gordon, the interim chief executive, will introduce and then hand over to his colleagues to take us through the paper. Thank you. Are you there, Gordon? Yes, thank you. We can't see you, though.
some good initial progress is underway at some pace. The big test, and I'd be interested to hear back from your conversation with colleagues in DLUC yesterday, but I think the big tests for all of this will be how the board handles this report in public in 3 weeks' time, the extent to which it's seen to embrace the issues, as opposed to potentially disagreeing with the odd point in the self-assessment. That will be an important phase. And then I think the next phase will be, particularly from DLUC and Bays, will be later in the year, are we making due progress against that plan at the pace that is reasonable and that we set out? And if not, what's getting in the way of that? And I think those are the two big points of interest for our regulatory audiences. And we'll be working through that in the next few months. So, Chair, I think that's what I'd like to say about introduction. I'll be here throughout and be able to take questions as we go along, if that's what you want to do.
Thank you very much, Gordon. I think, yes, thank you for staying on and being able to take questions. I don't think now is right. Let's hear about the improvement work and then we'll be able to form a view. So, Angela, are you going to introduce? Thank you.
Is it going red? Okay. Yes, thank you. And just to reiterate what the Chief Executive has shared, what's set out in the presentation that we'll take you through are the key elements that's going to board on the 19th of October. And yes, progress is already being made, including robust programme management that's being put in place. So part of the comment previously with regards to what skills training or development you need, we'll also cover in this presentation the role of audit and governance. So I think that's quite timely that we do pick up that conversation at the end. So I will start this presentation and then pass across to Jodie, who will pick things up. So if we can go on to the next slide. This just sets out for you, as Gordon has briefly covered, so how we've got here. And some of you may have seen these slides before, some of you won't, so I will take you through that. In the red block on the left-hand side, you will see the various elements that as a committee you'll be aware of. The investigations that have taken place, the review of governance, the previous Transformation Even Better programme, and also some external observations from the external auditor, DLUC, and also from the interim chief executive, who in July did share his views, and that was set out in the board report in July. And in July, the board report then set out these are things that we would want to take place to come back to September, which is obviously now being put back to October. And that has been our focus over the last period. There has been a robust self-assessment undertaken, and the interim chief exec have used that to set out in the report his diagnosis. As the chief exec has set out, additional capacity is being brought into the combined authority, and we are well underway of setting out the arrangements for the independent improvement board. And if we can go on to the next slide. So the October report, and I'll just focus on this because we've covered the other elements, it will include the diagnosis, the improvement board proposals, and also and it says in this slide, the initial priority improvement plan. We've done a lot of work over the last few weeks that we'll come on to on what is in the plan, the team that will deliver on it, the engagement with the constituent authorities, so the chief executives have been involved and are to support, to challenge, but also give resources to the development and the delivery of that plan. So I believe going into October's board, we are well placed with regards to the programme plan that we have set out to deliver what we will come on to. Next slide, please. The Chief Exec has identified that in looking at the why, the so what, why are we doing this? Evaluation has been undertaken externally, looking at the 6 combined authorities, and we have used that learning to look at, so what makes a combined authority successful? What are the elements, the prerequisites that you would have in place to have a successful combined authority? And on this slide, it sets out, and there is more detail in the report, the 5 big lessons. And these are that there is an absolute requirement to have an overarching strategy for the region. There needs to be a clarity of purpose for the combined authority, and also being clear on where it adds value. About the mayor having the right skills, behaviours, but also it being a strong outward-facing role. The board members are sufficiently aware and are skilled to go beyond party politics, but also practice a culture of pragmatism that focuses on the needs and the benefit of the region. And to support that there is an effective and efficient organisation that works as part of a whole system. Next slide, please. So in the report, as you read that report, what you will see that the Chief Executive has already set out this morning is that there are 6 key areas of priority that have been identified, that if we are going to meet and address those the areas from the previous slide, there are things that we need to focus on over the next 3 months. And these are set out and are the focus for the improvement plan. So the clarity of the political ambition and that there is an overarching strategy in place, the purpose and the role of the combined authority, and particularly where the combined authority can add value. That there is a comprehensive resetting ways of working, and that is aligned to the policy development, but also what the processes need to be prior to board processes to support that. That there needs to be established a long-term strategy for transport and an urgent development of the bus strategy, alongside reviewing the functioning and role of the business board. There needs to be, because of the tightness of budgets and the funding regimes, there needs to be a strategic review of income projections, including options to secure sustainability and looking at a more strategic approach to the application of funds. The organisation, the combined authority, needs to be an organisation that's fit for purpose, that focuses on performance and also has the agility to act on things that comes across it. And hopefully, as we are setting out the programme plan, you will see that we are working in an agile way, using the resources of the combined authority to practice and to focus on this approach. And we also need to make sure that there is capacity and arrangements to build that effective public relations to influence delivery operations. So all these 6 elements are interlinked. They form the focus for the improvement plan and the activities that will take place over the next 3 months and then following that. And if we could move on. But what's important, that we can plan the activities that we need to do. We can set out a programme plan, but we have to focus on what will be different. So as we look at our activities, we are clear and focused on what we need to make sure will be the outcome and difference. And these are set out in the report, but also set out briefly in this presentation on this slides. So it is about having a shift to a traditional arrangement for board cycles, to have a draft overarching strategy document, that there will be a draft medium-term financial strategy in place that links directly with the overarching strategy, that there is a worked-up transport strategy and bus strategy, and that there are proposals in place for the next phase of the business board, and there is resolutions to the current investigations that the committee will be aware of. And alongside of that, that there is capacity in the organisation, that the senior staffing structure is in place, and as the Chief Executive shared, that consultation has now concluded and is being implemented, and that there is a period of stability in the workforce. And we shared with staff this week the outcomes of the staff survey that was conducted over August, and we'll be working with staff about how we implement some of the things that they identified needed to change, but also how we move and expand some of the things that they value and are working well. And also that there is improved collaboration between the CPCA and constituent authority officers. And as I shared previously, chief executives are committing their personal support, but also the support of their teams in this improvement activity. Next slide, please. Also in the report is, so what will others see? Both you as the Audit and Governance Committee, external observers, the external auditor, DULUC, etc. And set out on these slides, and in the report there is more detail. I won't read them all out, but it is the focus on less tension and frustration, about when members are together, that the time is spent on worthwhile debate, that there's greater attention from ministers and influential stakeholders that focuses on what the region needs, which is linked to the potential of a future Devo deal. About staff viewing board members as role models for good behaviour and collaboration. So the joint working that needs to be in place, that for a successful organisation and combined authority, you would hope and want that to be in place. And the CPCA operation has matured, and there is a feel that it is one organisation, one CPCA, rather than a group of disparate thoughts, views, and also fractions. Next slide, please. As the Chief Exec has set out, and I have alluded to, there has been good working with the Chief Executives Group, who have provided advice, challenge, and some of this has been built into the report that you will receive and read. And you can see here the key issues that they have set out as observers. The poor behaviour at board meeting. There is a risk potentially that when board members read the report, then the focus might be on looking backwards, looking and testing out whether some of the comments, some of the narrative is accurate. But there needs to be a focus on moving and looking forward, which is why the focus for the improvement plan tries to move that direction in how the CPCA needs to develop. And it's also about the board endorsing the report, that it does agree, and it's more than an initial improvement plan now, it's more robust, the improvement plan, and that is supported by robust delivery and improvement and reporting apologies, and that is including to this Audit and Governance Committee. And that the Independent Improvement Board is on place, and that the areas of focus, the 6 key areas of focus, are in place, and we believe we've made progress on that. And it does demonstrate a more agile way of working. We can next slide, please. The Independent Improvement Board now has been discussed with DULUC, with the LGA, and there are discussions taking place with regards to the membership of that board, and I will come on to that. But the clarity of purpose, which is set out in the terms of reference, which is appended to the board report, is clear. That the Independent Improvement Board is there to provide external independent advice, challenge and expertise to ensure that the combined authority will give focus, grip and pace to the things that will hopefully be agreed at the October board. And it's to ensure that the improvement board that we have set out as officers, that we hope will be endorsed and agreed by the board, that there is some pace and delivery behind that through robust programme management arrangements. And it's also there to provide assurance to the Combined Authority Board and external agencies of the progress against the key outcomes that has been set out. Next slide, please. This slide sets out the relationship between the Independent Improvement Board. As I shared, it will provide assurance to the Combined Authority Board, but it will also provide assurance, as we will come on to as part of this discussion, the Audit and Governance Committee as part of its work programme, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, but also external bodies to ensure that there is confidence with regards to the progress that's being made, and will be supported by an improvement group that I will come on to briefly. Next slide, please. As I've shared with regards to terms of reference, we have been working with DULUC, the LGA, around the terms of reference for the Independent Improvement Board. And it is proposed, as set down here, that there will be a review, which has happened in other combined authorities and improvement arrangements, after 6 months to make sure that it is fit for purpose, it's doing what it's set out to do. And the membership will be based on having members of the Independent Improvement Board, which will include an independent chair. There will be a deputy who will have local roots and connections. There will be independent external members. The LGA will be in attendance at the board. DULUC have shared since these slides were circulated that they would not intend or expect to be a member or attend the board. What they would want to do is to be assured by the board of the progress that is being made. And in attendance, there will be the mayor, the constituent chief executives representative, the interim chief executives, and representatives from each of the political groups. I'm still waiting for responses from both the Conservatives and the Lib Dems with regards to who will be representative on the improvement board. And obviously the mayor will sit on will attend the board as an attendee, because it's important that there is that political balance. Next slide, please. This is the last slide from me before I pass across to Jodie. But this just gives you some detail, so hopefully you are assured and reassured with regards to the robustness of the improvement activity. So for the 6 key areas that I went through earlier on in this presentation, there are now in place 6 theme leads who are members of the executive team, and they are not leading potentially the areas that they have responsibility for in their day-to-day work. So for example, John, who is sitting around this table, John Alsop, is not responsible as a theme lead for the income generation, because it's important that as a group of senior officers, they are able to provide challenge, to provide support, but not mark their own homework with regards to the focus. There is also detailed project and resource arrangements in place. So there is a detailed project plan. Each of the themes are now developing their PIDs, and for those of you who are not programme managers at present, although you may be post-Christmas, a PID is a programme initiation document that sets out very clearly what you intend to do, how you intend to do it, what dependencies there are between the projects, what are the risks, how we mitigate those. Because as the combined authority needs to mature, this is a good opportunity to actually practice and put in place robust programme management arrangements to support this. So the improvement group will meet, and it will enable those cross-dependencies across the combined authority to be understood, but also a consistency of reporting through to the independent improvement board, but also through to yourselves as a committee, the combined authority board, and also provide updates to other external agencies who require updates. And to support this, there will be an engagement plan with both colleagues and members, not only to report on progress, but to ensure that people can be involved in the changes that need to take place. And on that, Chair, I will pass across to Jodie for the remainder.
Oops. Thank you, Angela. That's a very good place just to pause, I think, before we get and look at the audit governance as to whether we have questions or comments around the presentation up to this is the approach as opposed to our interaction with the approach. And I wondered if this would be a good moment for me to just report back on my conversation with DLUC, which I did yesterday with three members online, as I said, with the lead, the Deputy Director, Local Government Stewardship. And it was sort of reminded me how long it was since I've been in Whitehall, but it didn't show that not much has changed. I did about 10 years in Whitehall off and on. And circumspection when ministers are involved is fundamental on these matters. So they were circumspect in how they portrayed it. They were trying to be helpful, but ministers are yet to give a firm view. So they were not in a position to give a view, but they did make quite clear that all options are on the table and that tempo was important and that they will reach a stage when they have interacted with ministers to provide feedback on their assessment of where things stand. They undertook took my request that it would be helpful if they were able to give any pointers to me as chair of the committee on where we as a committee could help in this process or give scrutiny. But we left it also that unless something occurred between now and when they were able to provide a view, we would only interact again when there was a need. And the last point, and it's a question from me, was they did express that there are a number of lessons learned exercises they've published as a result of situations such as faced by the combined authority. And Angela, when you said you looked at other combined authorities, I don't think you mentioned the lessons learnt issued by Whitehall. Were they taken into? Have they been analysed and read across, taken into account, or is that something to be done?
Thank you, Chair. The Chief Executive might want to comment on this as well. But there has been a report, the evaluation of devolved institution by BEAS in 2021, and that report looked across at all 6 combined authorities. So that has been used to look in terms of the focus that we need to give, and also the improvement activity and various models for improvement boards, improvement panels, focus membership. We've looked across not only combined authority, but also local government with regards to what has been in place, but also what has worked well. The LGA also have done a review of an improvement board back in 2021, and we are proposing that 6 months into our independent improvement board, we will follow that same review. They will undertake that for us. So again, there is some consistency in we can learn the lessons both from that, but also so that we use that same model for reviewing our own practice. So yes, we have looked at models, practice reviews that have taken place. And Chair, I don't know whether the Chief Executive would want to comment further on that.
Gordon, do you have
Chair.
anything to add?
Yes, I mean, just to particularly on your point, as you say, as Angela said, yeah, there's been several reflective papers produced, one by the LGA, one by IPPR North, and as you say, the DLUC Lessons Learned report on their experience of, what has led to the department becoming involved in any form of intervention. So the short answer to your specific question is yes. It's a very exciting report. So seriously, it may well be something that board members, committee members might find interesting and useful.
Thank you, Gordon. Before I open it for debate, I wondered whether the external auditor felt this was an appropriate time to make any comments he wants to share, so that when we think about what the committee is going to do, we have that in our mind as well. I don't know, Mark, are you happy to do it now?
I would say that we are here in an observational capacity to see how the authority is responding to our letter of June. Clearly, I have had discussions with Angela and Gordon about the structure and the approach they are taking in responding, which is clearly laid out today, but it's the next few months that are more important to us rather than commenting on how far you have come so far.
And when we look at the timelines ahead, do you want to say anything about what we might see at our next meeting?
So I guess this is linking to your last agenda item about forward papers, but in discussions with John Alsop this week, the audit of the financial statements is likely to be pushed back to the new year, which would mean our ultimate audit opinion, which would include a value for money conclusion statement, would be March next year. But we would consider providing some information in the interim period about the authority's response to our June letter and how progress is being made. So we need to go away and think about how and what that would look like.
Thank you, Mark. So that's...
Sorry, Chair, could I just come in for a sec there on the back of Mark's comment? I am assuming, clearly Mark's saying, in a sense, that he's here to observe and track what's happening at due pace against the June letter. I would expect that after the Combined Authority Board this coming month, that we would draw together a sort of comprehensive response of all the things that have been tackled since June against the items that have been raised in the letter. In reality, that will cover a wide range of the issues raised. It's important that we pull them together so that they're visible because there's a large number of individual things. Clearly, what that can't do is the softer issue, which is how is the board behaving in October, and the reaction to that work. I mean, it might be of interest, just a link to this is that we have had to pull some of that information together as we've gone through the last month or so, because one of the issues that's cropped up is that in some government departments, particularly DFE, because they become aware of the letter from the external auditor, have asked other questions about some of our contracts. And so we've had to provide assurance about progress made and why we're a safe organization to contract with. And some of these things have been really quite small contracts, but it has fed its way through. But it does mean that we've had to pull together the information at each point as we've gone along. So I expect to be in a position to give a pretty full response to the external auditor end of October. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Gordon. And that means we'll be able to see it at our next meeting. Okay, before we go into the role of the audit and governance on everything we've had so far on this item, do people have comments or questions?
I have a number of questions. The first one, I would actually like to put Mark on the spot. In a previous meeting on another authority, he has used the phrase, "I am not unhappy with," and I would like him to indicate whether or not he is not unhappy with the approach that the combined authority is taking to developing an improvement plan. Would be one thing, because that might help us move forward slightly from his comment about he's here to observe.
That's a bit, I have to defer to the external auditor whether he wishes to answer that question, either confirm or deny.
So without fettering my future discretion in reporting, not all, the items which we would consider important in responding to our letter and the building blocks to do so, to build the car, going back to my analogy from the July meeting, I am seeing in the document before you. Clearly there's a whole difference between putting building blocks together and their effectiveness in a working environment.
The implementation of the plan is always the problem. Yes, go ahead.
Well, exactly, and I think that is extremely helpful. The other thing we've not heard yet of Angela is the timescale for developing the improvement plan. The other concerns that I've got is I think we're encouraging politicians to have some form of consensus in public and have their disagreements in private. I don't actually see how us as politicians work like that. There is a certain amount of grandstanding, and Steve and others would confirm, on both sides of the fence, or all sides of the fence, when we have meetings in public. So to what extent are you realistically expecting behaviours to significantly change as a result of this improvement plan? And the final question is, do we have any views about what the Mayor is thinking about this improvement plan? We've heard from Gordon as to what's being proposed, but I haven't yet heard whether Nick Johnson is broadly likely to be content with it when it goes in October or not. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just look to my boss and see whether Gordon would want to ask. I'm happy to respond to those, Gordon, if you're content with me.
Well, if I pick up some and then you pick up the timing one.
Okay.
So on the second part, the behaviours, I think there are two different elements to this. The first is that there are some behaviours that are just dysfunctional, that stop things working well. And the full report, when you see it, does detail some of the formal decision-making processes. And what's striking, and these are common to all combined authorities, what's striking is that a wide range of individuals or small groups of individuals have the power of veto over very many things. And the narrative from DLUC is, well, that was deliberate, because combined authorities, mayoral combined authorities, are meant to be vehicles of consensus speaking on behalf of an area. And therefore, the only sensible thing to do is to seek consensus and give one voice to Whitehall. That, in a sense, is why they were set up, not as another medium to play out inter-party politics. But at board level, there are two different things. There are some behaviours that people report and see where it just shouldn't be happening in a committee or a board anywhere in local government. And then there are a second range of things related to what I've said, which is there is a game to be played here. And one of the insights to other combined authorities who are seen to be doing well is that they have the individual players in an area, because virtually every combined authority is made up of councils of different political colours. There is no place where there's a simple, overwhelming majority and nobody else has any say. That the only practical thing, if what's most important to you as a combined authority is getting the most benefit for your area, the game to play is to be absolutely focused on the messages that can be agreed on to government. And that means, it does mean being a bit more sophisticated around how and when political debates happen. It's not that they can't happen and shouldn't happen. It's that people need to be quite circumspect about what it is they're trying to gain, about whether it's some sort of party advantage or a gain for the area. And those are some of those points are the crux of the big challenge for the politicians here. Angela, do you want to, there was a second question, which is around the timing of some of the improvement work?
No, thank you. So the question was about the timescale of developing the plan. There is a plan. The improvement group that will lead all the themes has met already and will meet bi-weekly on a Tuesday morning. And John and Jodie are theme leads and are currently developing in detail the activities. The plan will be appended to the board report that I understand will be circulated tomorrow to give members the time to read the report and the plan in detail prior and leading up to the October board. So there will be full opportunity for you to look and read that document. The plan, because it's post-September's board meeting, we have put into the draft plan an update on progress so far against each of the themes. And as you can imagine, the progress so far for some of them is putting the architecture in place, the project plans, the project teams, the discussions with constituent chief executives. So all of those things we are building and putting together so that we can make pace quickly. And in the plan that I'm just looking at a copy of, it's very clear on the outcomes that will be delivered, the description of what will take place, what the key actions are, what the delivery date for those key actions, and also who the owner of that action is. And through the project teams, that will be managed so that we can ensure that there is progress made. There will obviously be issues that we will need to address, but that is why we've put in place the working group. So we have something in place rather than developing a plan and then seeing whether it's picked up or not. We've put the architecture in place to give it a good chance of being embedded, but also being delivered. But I would very much welcome your views when that plan is circulated with the report. And because it's our plan, and it's important that it meets your needs, but also you have a confidence level in it that it will deliver on what needs to change.
That's very helpful. The only question you didn't address is Dr. Nick Johnson signed up to all of this? Is he content with the improvement plan? Presumably he is if it's going to the October board.
So the Mayor has been briefed on more than one occasion.
Any other comments, colleagues? David.
Thank you, Chair. It just strikes me, having listened to Gordon's comments and read through the paperwork earlier on, and also Mark indicating, if I could say it, that what's there is okay, but it didn't address all the things. It's just in the 5 big lessons. Personally, I would have had 6 big lessons, and the one that's missing for me is that the CPCA is actually delivering for the people of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and more importantly, can be seen to be delivering. Clearly with that, because from what Gordon was saying, now he's getting concerns about even smallish contracts. Part of the underlying stuff that I read through into the external auditor's letter was our capacity to deliver as an organisation. And I think that needs to be running as a thread right through everything that's going on. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure who.
Yeah, I was just going to say, that's noted. I think, again, Gordon, I'm not sure whether you would want to comment. I think there are some things that will run through all those themes, and that capacity to deliver is absolutely key across all of those areas. So I think that's noted, and we'll look at how that ties in.
Well, first of all, I'd say that Mark Hodgson is a man of few words, but every word counts. And I listen very, very carefully to every single word he says. And I think the point he made about the difference between the building blocks and effective delivery was very well made. And my colleague on the committee, Councillor David Brown, has just made the point about what this is all about, which is actually delivering for the people of the Cambridge and Peterborough area. And so I think the point that's been registered about making sure that this is all leading towards effective delivery is central to all of this. And I appreciate the focus is on the response to the 1st of June letter and the messages from DULUC, but actually we all have to be very, very aware about the ultimate destination. I just wanted to pick up on the 5 big lessons as well, and I strongly endorse your point about number 6. I think that it's worthwhile just going back to the DULUC 6 indicators of poor culture and weak governance, because I think they're very well worth reflecting on. Some of these are in the 5 big lessons, but not all of them. And they overlap with the 8 points that Gordon presented to us at the July meeting as well. And I would like to think that those 8 points and the 6 indicators could be looked at again and see how they could be better reflected in these 5 big lessons and prerequisites for success. Because until we have satisfied the external auditor, the internal auditor, and DULUC, we're going nowhere. And so we may make sure that we're meeting all of these as the prerequisites for success. I could go through them, but I don't think that's really necessary, because it's the point. It's an officer task to take away and look at that. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you. We started with the July report and the 8 key areas. But Chair, we will go back. We will look to ensure that they are covered, that we can map and see where they are being picked up. And it's our plan. So if we need to change any element of it, we can do that. But we will go back and just do that, look at whether we have been able in the report and in the plan to address and make sure that they are clear. But that was our starting point, the July report.
Thank you, Angela.
I think in that context, it would be worth looking at the fifth bullet point, the effective, efficient organisation, which works as best as part of the local government system. There's a huge amount under what constitutes effective and efficient organisation, which is very much at the centre of the improvement plan, and I think it's specifically relating to the things that the external auditors are looking for. So I think that needs further exemplification and clarity. Thank you.
Yes,
Chair,
thank you.
shall I just
Yes.
shall I just add a
Gordon, please.
comment to several of these questions? I mean, I think the call to be really clear about a focus on delivery and delivery to the place is right, and I recognise that. And through some of the strands we've been talking about, that is how we will do that. The part that's connected to the system, because I do think that is one of the particular weaknesses of the way that the combined authority has been working over some years, is a big issue. And the fact that the local authority chief execs have stepped up to be able to work with the combined authority to work on the whole of that plan, as well as delivery, is really important. So one of the detailed points is that the 6 strands of work are being led by a CPCA officer, but in each case, one of the chief execs from the constituent local authorities has offered to attach themselves to that work and both be a support and help to do that. So the system side of that is really incredibly important. In terms of delivery and performance, while it clearly is a very significant issue, there is a flip side to it, because there are areas of the CPCA that are delivering actually quite well. It's not that, I mean, it is one of these slightly odd repercussions of having an organization that's too siloed, that actually some silos work fine and others are less good. What we need to be doing, so it's not that everything's wrong with delivery. There's clearly improvements that can be made across the board, but it's a matter of the systems inside the organization. And I do agree with, I think someone made a comment that that's really a sort of officer process. And I agree with that. It's not, it's fine for members in different committees and guises to challenge and question performance, but actually the actual delivery of it is an officer function. The trick, I think, is not just about improving delivery in certain areas. It's about making sure that the connections between the different areas of policy and delivery are made, and we move away from what's been quite a siloed organization over some years. But it's helpful to have that pointed up. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you, Gordon. Imtiaz.
Thank you, Chair. Just on slide number 10, it tries to outline the relationship between the Improvement Board and the Combined Authority Board, and there's also a box for us here, Audit and Governance Committee. I wasn't sure what that text just below the box meant. So it says, provide assurance on approach and drive forward improvement actions on A&G function. Is that what the Improvement Board is aiming to do with us as a committee, or is that what the Improvement Board is expecting from us as a committee to do for the Improvement Board, which is relatively new, firstly? And secondly, the bit of text that links the improvement board to the combined authority board says improvement board will provide assurance, report performance, risk and issues to board. I think as an audit committee, I think it would be very useful for us and very informative, certainly help us in doing the audit function if we had some kind of MI on what the items were that were identified by our external auditors, how they link directly to what we have in our improvement plan, which is to be presented at the board, almost line by line. And then some key metrics. I don't know what they would be because I've not seen what the actions are yet, but some key metrics on what we're doing to achieve those, how far along the road are we, and whether we're, a level of confidence on whether we'll be able to get our external auditors over the line on each of their challenges. If we had that kind of MI, then that comment at the bottom kind of makes a little bit more sense in that we'd be provided the audit function to make sure that the improvement plan or the improvement board is fulfilling its duty and obligation.
I'm thinking, well, there's any response to that? I'm afraid I lost the plot. Which page were you on? I don't have the slides by number.
Slide number 10, I don't know if you're...
Okay. Right. Who would like to comment on what's been said?
Chair, just with regards to the specific question about how you pull together the information again.
Sorry, before we give, are there any other comments before we move on to Judy? I just like to comment about how, if there's no, it seems to me that everything is on the table and there are so many moving parts and so many people are working intensely to try and tackle all the issues. I think our challenge as a group to bear in mind is that we shouldn't be doing other people's work, and we should be clear about when we discuss our role, what our focus should be. And it struck me that, as the point that MTR said, we need to be looking to the improvement board, which its role is to get a grip and focus and tempo and provide assurance. We need some direct relationship with that, because in the end, I paraphrase, but we've got a list of comments from the external auditor, which started with this. We need assurance that those comments are being dealt with and actioned and are in place in a satisfactory way. Because we're an assurance group. And so I think when we talk about our role, could we bear that in mind so that we don't fall off the path and start duplicating what people can provide as assurances from elsewhere. Okay. Jodie, do you want to now take us through?
Thank you. If we could return to the slides, I think it's slide 13. And Councillor, hopefully we'll address the points you've raised in setting out the future role of the committee. But if at the end it's still not clear, please come back to me. If we could go to that's it there. So before we move on to the role of the committee in regards to the improvement framework, we just wanted to provide some reassurance around actually responding to the review of governance, which of course previously came to the committee and was endorsed as presented, as it was at scrutiny and as it was at the CA board. And assure you that is obviously feeding into the single improvement plan for the combined authority. What we've done with the review of governance, we have gone through all conclusions and all recommendations within that document to develop a governance action plan, which we've then split out into strategic elements and operational elements. Those wider, bigger strategic elements, things around culture, behaviour, and then some of those key foundations and fundamentals of good governance have all been fed in to the Chief Exec's analysis and the improvement plan. But there's a number of operational elements in there that we can pick up and start to work on immediately. We don't have to wait for the October report, and we are doing that at this moment in time. So we are already working on numerous improvements to process, how we engage our constituents in the build-up to boards and committees, how we present our reports to our board, how we prepare for those meetings, so issues around the cycle. And we're also working internally in the CA with our business areas, so they have better understanding of governance and governance requirements, even developing business area governance leads in each area. We've already started work on review of the Constitution and make sure we have a Constitution review plan that aligns with the improvement plan, because there are obviously many changes coming out of the improvement plan that will have a constitutional impact. And we've been working on our forward planning approach in the combined authority, looking to move from our current position of a 3-month forward plan to a 6-month forward plan, which is in line with some of the best practice approaches taken by other combined authorities. As I said, as well as that, a number of those items from the review of governance have fed into the Chief Exec report, and they are going to be detailed heavily in that report going in October. There'll be details in there about how we move the CA board to a more strategic focus, and reduce the burden of business and get it discussing those key strategic regional matters that we want it to be focused on, amending the delegations so our executive committees are actually taking decisions on those areas that they are specifically thematically focused upon. We will need, obviously, to develop a transitional committee structure. We are obviously looking at our current Housing Communities Committee and the future of that. And we're also reviewing the devolution deal to see if there's anything we've missed in there in regards to impacts upon our future committee structure and cycle. As well as I said, looking at the way we report, the information we're giving to our members, our decision makers, our committees, so that they are best enabled to fulfil their roles and responsibilities. As I said earlier, reducing those barriers that we have in play that stop our boards and committees actually operating effectively. Go on to the next slide, please. So moving on to the role of the Audit and Governance Committee in improvement, key elements to focus on. Key role for the committee is, as the Chair previously just mentioned, to assure itself that the improvement framework is going to satisfy DLUC and the external auditor concerns that have previously been raised. To do that, the committee needs to assure itself that the improvement framework is on track, and it is proposed that there is an improvement highlight report presented to Audit and Governance Committee that sets out the high-level view on performance, on delivery of that plan, on risks, and also really highlight specifically key issues that may come through individual work streams, that may be coming from the improvement board or may be coming from elsewhere, so that you are aware of those, you can identify those themes. It's proposed that there's a cover report that comes alongside that includes a specific commentary on the actions taken and next steps specifically in relation to those concerns raised by the external auditor, and that would come to each meeting. Next slide. There's also numerous work streams, obviously, within the improvement plan that I feel have a real link to this particular committee. And it's important at the appropriate points that those work streams engage the committee, make you aware of what's happening, why, what the best practice is, what we're looking to develop, what the outcomes are. So you have an opportunity to tell us from your committee perspective whether those things are going to deliver the information and the approaches you require to be assured moving forward. And those are things like our performance management framework and our approach to performance, the risk management framework, financial management and escalation, which was mentioned previously, and our corporate governance escalation processes. You're making sure that you're assured that they exist, they're the right ones, they're reporting and escalating to the right places. As I mentioned, the Constitution is obviously another key area which we're seeking to address. We've already had conversations with the Chair, and we have established an Officer Constitution group to scope out that review. We've already spoken to all mayoral combined authorities about their constitution, issues that they have with those for us to also take on board. We've engaged obviously the new monitoring officer who's part of that group, and we've been working very closely with Councillor Edna Murphy, who is the governance lead from the CA board, who is representing the board with some political cover and view as we go through development of that document. Obviously, any developments and rewrite or changes to the constitution will come to this committee for consideration and looking for endorsement before they go on to our combined authority board for recommendation and consideration. Next slide, please. Here I've highlighted a few other areas that you may as a committee want to consider as potential content within your own work programme. These relate to primarily the review of governance. So the review of governance highlighted 4 particular issues for this committee to consider. And we will be looking to obviously address some of these as well in the response in the improvement plan. So the Performance Audit and Risk Committee, where body it exists within the combined authority, the review concluded that there needs to be a much enhanced and clearer links between that committee and the Audit and Governance Committee, making sure that Park is effectively working for you, escalating items, linking in to make sure you are able to consider the key information that I think we've already referred to previously, perhaps you were not getting in the past 12 months. Performance management is another one of those. We need to make sure we get to a point where we can clarify the role of Audit and Governance Committee in regards to performance management, what level of information you require in order to be able to assure yourselves as a committee. This also applies to the assurance framework, and we mentioned project management. Obviously, the assurance framework is there to oversee our approach to the initiation, development and approval of our projects and programs. There's an opportunity and a role, I would argue, for this committee to assure itself that the combined authority is compliant with that assurance framework, as well as potentially even examine ways that we can improve that document and make sure we are best practice and in line with government requirements, particularly given some of the recent Green Book amendments and changes. And we've made reference to financial management. The review of governance reported that there was a need, a feeling of a need that training on the financial management role of the committee was needed and was missing in the current induction training programme for Audit and Governance Committee members. And so obviously we'll be looking to see how we can relate that to skill sets for the committee and improve those moving forward. On the left-hand side, these are matters that I've picked up as previously being mentioned by this committee in conversations where I've attended these meetings. Assurance framework compliance, which I've already mentioned, coming out of the review of governance and how you could potentially assess that compliance. There are approaches, particularly I know West Midlands, where their Audit and Governance Committee looks at how the assurance framework is actually being complied with. The whistleblowing arrangements, reviewing the process and obviously the recent experience of this combined authority to ensure that those arrangements are fit for purpose. We've had conversations previously about the annual governance statement, making sure moving forward that that is in line with the identified sit for solace criteria and principles. As I previously mentioned again, what scope is there to improve our assurance framework? How can we come along with new design principles specifically linked to this region, which all other combined authority assurance frameworks try to represent, so we can drive through regional criteria when developing and approving our projects and programs. Next slide. So finally, the ask of this committee, what we're asking you to do, obviously to note that presentation that we've put before you and the proposed content going to board in the October 19th report. We're looking, if possible, for the committee to endorse that approach and those next steps are set out in the presentation. Obviously welcome any other additional comments that you may wish to make for us to take on board. And we ask that you give consideration to what needs to be included in your own work programme regarding the improvement framework, particularly in regards to those last few slides that I've just taken you through. Any questions? And hopefully, Councillor, that answers your query regarding the role of A&G.
Thank you very much, Jodie. Comments? Questions?
Yeah, I'm not sure it does. So certainly the penultimate slide of that presentation gives us a good outline of the kind of things that audit and governance need to consider with PARC, performance management, assurance framework, and financial management. And that's certainly, I think, an expectation of being a member of this committee. My question was specifically around what's been captured in the improvements report that goes to the board, and whether we'll have any direct exposure to the audit and monitoring of that, or like you said, John, that's probably just us stepping on other people's toes. That's probably the work for the board and the improvement board to consider, not necessarily for us. So I think my question was more around, once that improvement report is final, do we as an audit committee need to monitor its ongoing implementation?
Well, I open it to others, but the way I've interpreted the presentation, the improvement board, that's its purpose. And what we want from them is assurance or concerns. Because it's like this, I don't know how long your report is that's going to the next CA board, but it's plenty of pages, isn't it? 60? But it's of that all. Yeah. So I don't. I didn't ask for that to come to us as a draft or a proposal, because I saw that as beyond the strategy or strategic needs of what we have. I don't think we're treading on other people's toes. I would describe it like that. I think we are using the work of others to give us a competent insight into progress, because the complexities of this and the competence that we collectively produce, whilst it might be strong, it won't be as strong as the improvement board. So if the assurance for the whole organisation comes from there, that's what we should be, in my opinion, we should be focused on. What are they telling us? Are we satisfied? If we're not satisfied, ask them to come and talk to us. So I would hope that that gives you the answer about how we do it. And when we look at the 7, 8 things he's got on here, we only have 4.5 meetings a year. I think we have to be pragmatic and realistic.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think that's probably a pretty good way of approaching it. I think what this committee would still find useful is an internal audit view of the progress of that report and the implementation of that report, and then what our internal auditor's view is of how this will be received ultimately by our external auditor, who's keeping his cards very close to his chest. Again, it's a suggestion. I'm not insisting on this, but what I don't want is for us to end up in March where we've concluded all of our actions, got the building blocks all there, and not put them together the way they're supposed to be, and then we're still not satisfying our external auditors. So just some kind of comfort that what we're doing is correct.
I think the sentiment is unarguable. It's only the methods, I think, we might have to take a view as we go along. Yes,
Thank you,
Angela.
Chair. Can I assure audit members that in the terms of reference that's been set out for the independent improvement board, the purpose, this is one of the key areas, to provide regular advice, challenge and support to the combined authority on the full range of identified improvement activities, and in particular in the delivery of the recommendation in the external auditor letter 1st of June 2022 and governance review 27th of July. So that's specifically set out in its purpose. And in the improvement board's accountabilities, alongside being accountable to the combined authority board, it sets out that the IIB, the Independent Improvement Board, will ensure the chairs of Audit and Governance Committee and the Overview and Scrutiny Committee receive regular updates on all the improvement action. So that is set out, Chair, in the terms of reference for the Independent Improvement Board, and it's for how you would wish, A, that information to come, and B, are there things that as a committee you would wish further information on. that through the improvement group we can ensure that you receive. But it's set out very clearly in the terms of reference, both its purpose but also its accountability to ensuring this committee is kept informed.
Thank you, Angela. I think if we go back to page 27, I don't have the slide numbers, I'm afraid. This is one of Jodie's. Additionally, the committee will receive in due course a report from the external auditor and have the opportunity to discuss the authority's response to the concerns raised. Well, that's part of the tapestry. But understanding how we get feed in, not just to the chair, but to the committee for the improvement board, I think this needs to be there needs to be no doubt about it. Now, I know this is a closed group, the improvement board, as I understand it. It's not a public meeting when they meet. Is there an opportunity for observers from this group, if anybody wanted to go along and not join the meeting, but attend the meeting to satisfy if they have any concerns about how it functions?
Yes, Chair. The Independent Improvement Board will have a number of members, but there will also be individuals in attendance. And yes, they can seek people to attend if they think it's helpful, but also individuals can also seek that they might need or wish to attend. So yes, that's built into the arrangements for the workings of the Independent Improvement Boards. So they can either request you attend or you can request to attend.
Thank you, Angela. And I think it's to be borne in mind, that invitation is there. So as we'll get our first report in December, which will be the output of where we are. And will they have met by then, the improvement board?
I hope so.
Yeah, so we could see a first feedback from the improvement board in the report that we get in, and we can then take a view, if people are happy with that, as to whether we'd like to. These meetings are going to be what, monthly or? Yeah, whether one of us feels it would be helpful to go and just observe one to get first-hand opinion. So, shall we see what we're given in December and in the way it gives us the insight to these big questions, and see whether that is adequate for what we need in order to satisfy ourselves that what needs to be done is being done, and not just the building blocks, but progress. I take that. I see lots of nods. Thank you. Are there any other comments?
A couple of minor comments. One, Jodie referred to the Performance Assurance and Risk Committee, which I must admit I'd either forgotten about or wasn't aware of, so perhaps you could remind us what that is. And the second, in various instances on page 27 as an example, the committee is to assure itself and the board. So is that the Combined Authority Board or the Improvement Board? And if it's the Combined Authority Board, as I assume it is, would it be helpful for some sort of arrow on the flowchart to be included to demonstrate that there is a feedback loop from the assurance and governance and presumably overview and scrutiny to the board on these matters? Thank you.
On the final point, yes, you're right. It's Combined Authority Board, and you're right. That would be very, very helpful. We'll make that amend. On Park, we actually have Chris Bolton on the call, who operates that committee and can answer the question in regards to the specific purpose of Park, if Chris is there.
Are you there, Chris?
I am here. I'm just trying to get my video working. There we go. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. The Park is a sort of says on the title, a performance and risk committee. It's an internal group that encompasses the executive team, so all the directors of the individual areas, Gordon, Angela's transformation, and we also have officers right across the organisation. It's a forum really to discuss obviously performance and risk, and we've got a risk paper a little bit later on the agenda. but also it's a forum to allow, real visibility across all the work programs that's going on. So any projects that come forward, be it internal ones or external, it gives the organisation opportunity to see what the projects are very early on, whereas previously that wasn't the case.
Okay, thank you. I think David Brown will correct me if my memory is on time is wrong, but some time ago, that's better, we did get a report on a very high level insight into performance against the business plan, which only came once and for reasons that elude me didn't come back again. But if I look at the situation that we're in, one of the things that surprised me personally was that we had no understanding in this group of the staffing deficiencies, not the quality but the quantity, within the combined authority, and how impairing that was for the business of the organisation. So I do think I'd ask you to have how we can get a simple representation. Is the risk register is one thing. There's other jargon, the balanced scorecard or whatever, but we do need some insight, which isn't 60 pages, on where these critical points are. Because I wonder if we'd realised what the staffing deficiencies were, and we might have taken a different view when we discussed some of our business in the past. So I'm sure members would support me in saying that we welcome the creation of this group, but we need something out of it which is utile for our needs. And could I ask you with colleagues to work on some sort of simple overview piece of paper? It might only be information for our meetings that gives us those key indicators of the internal efficiency and working of the organisation rather than the improvement plan issues.
Absolutely noted, Chair, and obviously we have lots of information, performance dashboards. Let me have a look at it, and
we don't want to be weighed down, and we don't want to be led down.
Don't worry,
no 60 pages of detail, because we don't have the time or the knowledge. But the big issues like gapping, those are the ones we need to get more texture on, I think, because this goes back to the fact that none of us are inside the organisation, so we don't pick up the buzz that you might do if one of us was part of it.
And Chair, if it's helpful and reassuring, that specific ask is one of the actions within the improvement plan, that we have a fit for purpose document coming from Park, specifically tailored for Audit and Governance Committee, to give you that information as you've just set out.
Okay, thank you. And I was grateful for Graham for raising on this same slide 27. Another key role for the committee is to assure itself and the board that the improvement is on track. Now, this is like double jeopardy, it seems to me, because that's what the improvement board is tasked with. So I just think that when we pursue that bit, because yes, we do have to assure ourselves that all is being fixed. But maybe as could I ask that we go forward and recognise that assurance, we'll get auditor assurance, but the vehicle that this organisation is using to give itself assurance is the improvement board, and it's our role through scrutiny of that and other information to reach a final assurance judgment which we can give the board. Does that make sense? Because otherwise you're asking us to do it you're asking us to do the improvement board's work.
For clarity, the ask is that you're looking to assure yourself that the improvement board is operating effectively, and that therefore the improvement framework is on track. It's the improvement board's obviously role to drive that performance, challenge it, and then report that performance up to the CA board.
Okay. Thank you. That helps. It's just that when things are abbreviated for slides, I would try to avoid those things. Are there any more comments on this? Simon.
Chair, we're looking at the work programme. We'll just go to on page 30, the matters the committee is asked to do. Yeah. Okay.
Combined Authority Board. We endorse the next steps in regard to the committee, I take this.
Is the Audit and Governance Committee willing to endorse the approach as set out of what is being included and taken to the October Combined Authority Board meeting?
I think that's a step too far. Because when we play these, if you play these boxes, well, the Audit and Governance Committee endorsed it, so it must be all right. And I wonder whether we have enough competence and sight at the moment to make that endorsement. David Brown, help me.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, from what we heard earlier on, some of this is still work in progress. So I'm not prepared to endorse something that we know is going to change.
Okay, so do we welcome the approach being taken?
Chair, we note it.
We don't even feel like welcoming. Do we get no happiness out of this? Surely we get some happiness. Okay, well, we're not using his words, he's saving those. May I ask that we welcome it? We welcome the... Now we've got to give consideration of what included regarding the improvement framework in our work programme. Well, we have a work programme. We agreed right at the beginning, we're going to have a little look at our strengths and weaknesses. So, allied to that, could I ask officers to, because there's everything in that list. We need to timeline it, to look at the findings of the governance review, our current work programme, and what we're going to do on our weaknesses and work that we agreed at the beginning with the action plan, and give us a proposal for a revised work plan for the next meeting. And I think it's true to say that by the time we get to the work plan in every agenda, everybody nods and we leave the room. So I think we need to move it up for the next agenda item and have a serious think about it. Does that make sense?
I think just for clarity, just drawing the threads together from what was in this report and in the reports to the previous committee, I think what we can expect to see from the officers' recommendations to us on the forward programme is obviously first and foremost the monitoring report against the progress with the improvement plan. And that's a report on performance, risk and issues with the covering report on actions against the external auditors' significant concerns and any briefings that you have received in the interim. Then there's the 4 elements which were set out in recommendations 35, 36 and 37, 38, so there's 4 of them. From the governance review, which relate to the links between the Performance and Risk Committee and the roles and information they will provide to this committee, performance management and the information requirements that we need to undertake that role, the assurance framework and oversight of compliance and best practice. And as Jodie's alluded to, and he's made the reference twice now, to best practice in the West Midlands, and financial management training. And to that, today we've added the review of the strengths and weaknesses. And so they're the ones that I see within that. There are other elements in the improvement work stream as well, which relate to that aren't referred to elsewhere. One is risk management, and the other one was the corporate governance escalation processes. So it's quite a lot there that's come out of both the previous meeting and this meeting for our attention.
And thereby, that's why teasing out which bits we do and when is something we need some reflecting on. That's why I look to officers to help us in that regard. Okay. Are there any other points before I close this item? We've been going for about 2 hours now, and I hope this isn't a harbinger of what's going to come as more and more of this improvement activity goes on. But we've got a couple of weighty items on the agenda, particularly in regard to subsidiary companies and risk. Would anybody like a 5-minute leg stretch in the knowledge that we're going to be here a while yet? 5 minutes or 10? 5. The man with the crutches says 5, so that's the leg stretch we're going to get. Thank you. one or two members have said that they have further meetings to go to, and I did allow, because of the importance, the last item to have a full debate. But now we're a bit pressed for time. It's just coming up to 12:05. We need to finish by 1 o'clock. So I'd ask us to pedal harder. We do have some substantive items, but let's stick to the substance. And I think this is how it's going to be from now on. So it's always difficult to sit on your point, but please sit on it if it's not a material matter. And with that, I would ask, we've got Anna O'Keefe, Senior Manager from the Internal Auditors, is introducing the two internal audit reports we have today. And for the first one, item 5, Internal Audit Progress Report, I'd ask Anna to go through it briefly, and I'd ask us to keep any questions or comments to definitely material so that we can focus on the following item, which is about the subsidiary companies. Anna, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I will keep it brief on the progress report in that case. So in terms of 2021-22 plan, we finalised 3 reports since the last meeting. That's the Capital Programme Monitoring and Reporting Report, which is Reasonable Assurance, a follow-up report, which was Reasonable Progress, of both of those positive opinions, and then the subsidiary company governance report, Minimal Assurance, which is the next item. Oh, sorry. Then in terms of 22-23, there's one report which is currently in draft, which is the data protection audit that was issued at the end of August. And there's one audit ongoing, that's risk management, and the fieldwork's drawing to a close on that, and we'll be debriefing shortly. So hopefully those will come through to the next meeting. The remaining audits, we're in the process of having scoping meetings for those, agreeing start dates. That's going quite well. So, you know, I'm happy that we're going to be able to progress some of those audits. There might be some slight changes to the start dates that are in the programme, but nothing significant. Except for the IT audit, which we have been asked to push back to Q4 due to some changes that are currently going on and that's taking officer time. So that one is going to be pushed back to next calendar year, so Q4. Just on section 3, where we talk about changes to the plan, the other change that I've put in there is about the affordable housing programme. There was some discussion at the last meeting in July about whether that remained appropriate, given that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee is also doing some work on that. In the progress report, it says we're having discussions. We've had those discussions now, and we have concluded that there is some work that we can do that won't overlap. That's going to focus on the grant application process and the monitoring of that through the sort of development programme. So there will be an audit on the affordable housing programme. I think that was all I was going to pull out of the progress report.
Thank you very much, Anna. Any comments? We're asked to note the report and progress. Any comments? Okay, noted. Thank you very much. Right, we're now going to come on to the subsidiary governance report. And if I was a bit peevish earlier about subsidiary companies, I'm really peeved that we are faced with the second minimal assurance in the time the combined authority has been in existence, particularly as we have been sending the message on this subject for over a year. And that we'll hear what we say, but it does seem to me that this is an extremely unwelcome opinion, and it's something we need to understand a bit more. So Anna, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So the audit looked at the governance relating to the 4 operational subsidiaries that were in place at the time we did the audit, which was spring 2022. The draft report was issued in June. There were 2 high priority actions and 3 medium priority actions coming out of that. I'm going to come back to the first high priority action in a minute, because I think that's the one that sort of mentions and refers to this committee. So the second high priority action was around the business plans. You've already mentioned this today, that according to the shareholder agreements with those companies should be reviewed by the CPCA each quarter, but that wasn't happening. There wasn't a mechanism in place for that to happen. And then the medium priority actions around, firstly, shareholder agreements. Whilst we were given copies of the shareholder agreements, we didn't have signed versions, so we had to assume that they were the up-to-date agreements that reflected the signed agreements, but that was an assumption we had to make when we did the audit. There's also some findings around the risk registers of the subsidiary companies and how they could be improved. And then in relation to the business growth company, the shareholder agreement refers to a programme management committee, which didn't seem to be in place. We weren't given any evidence that that was in place and operating. So if I come back to the first high priority action, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee and the Audit and Governance Committee have responsibilities within their terms of reference for monitoring and scrutinising the management of the subsidiary companies. But at the time we did the audit, neither committee had yet received any reports regarding the management or performance of the subsidiary companies. We did note that the Audit and Governance Committee was aware of their responsibilities, that they needed to identify how they would discharge those responsibilities. And obviously I know that in the July meeting you did have a report on subsidiary companies, but that was after the time that we had done this audit. And also I noted from attendance at that committee that you did have some concerns about the report that was presented to you and whether it reflected what you needed it to. So that was the summary of the high and the medium priority actions coming out of that report, which did lead to a minimal assurance opinion.
Thank you, Anna. How often do you have minimal assurances, or do you encounter in internal audit work something which is so inadequate?
It's fairly rare, but it's not unheard of, particularly when we're looking at larger organisations with high risk areas. So it's not unheard of, but it's quite rare. We do issue a benchmarking report once a year for the sector, which I think would answer that question, but it's in the very low percents.
Thank you. Sorry, Ed, the interim monitoring officer, Edwina, said some comments at the beginning when we were doing the action plan. Do you have anything further you'd like to add before we have discussion, Edwina?
No, really, just to re-emphasize what I said earlier. We are reacting to the comments made in the internal report. And as I said earlier, the plan is to come to this committee fairly regularly with updates. So there are things that are going on in the background between officers, but we're hoping to be able to come back to this committee October, November with an update of where we are with that.
Well, thank you. I was voting. Comments then and questions.
Thank you, Chairman. I won't repeat what I said earlier on, but I will repeat the word drift. If we look at number 5 about establishing a clear governance, reporting and oversight structure by the end of February 2023, is it really going to take 5 months when we've been asking for this for nearly 2 years?
Chair, can I?
Yes, please.
Yeah. The reason for that is that there are steps that need to be undertaken before we get there. So first and foremost, some of the companies need to have new directors appointed to them, and that will be going to the board to do that. So we have to work with the timetable of the board. So that's one of the steps that needs to be taken. Also, we need to look at whether there could be members who are appointed to the boards of the companies. The different options that we are considering in the background, and this is not something that we would wish to rush, because there are advantages and disadvantages of either members being on the board or whether it would be co-opted members. these sort of matters need to be looked at carefully, and also the legal repercussions of whatever options we do take. However, what we are planning to do in the interim is to come regularly to this committee, say from October, November, to report on what's going on in those companies. So you will be kept abreast of the progress. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Adina. Any other comments?
Just to follow up on that, I think I agree, Edwina. You don't want to rush in the appointment of board members just for the sake of it. But I think the challenge was to set up a structure of scrutiny which could identify which role holders would be on the hook, as it were, for certain actions. And what we need to do is just outline that as soon as possible. And I think that will probably help you to secure the members you need, because you'll be recruiting people with a clear idea of what their roles and responsibilities would be, rather than trying to determine those after the person's been recruited. So I'd certainly agree with David on the challenge there. I think it's something that we could potentially bring forward. I had a question as well that was on what the repercussions are for these subsidiary companies. You wouldn't, in the normal course of things, in a regular business environment, do business with companies that don't have statement of accounts, projected balance sheets, a full cash flow business case. So for these subsidiary companies, I know we've got strong links and ties with them, but what are the repercussions if these companies can't get their house in order in a reasonable amount of time? I don't know who that question's for. Probably Edwina again. Yeah.
Yes. The difficulty is, even though the subsidiary companies are separate legal entities, the parent company is the authority. So we are limited in a way as to what repercussions can be meted out to those companies. Like I said, there are discussions in the background, and these are some of the issues that we have identified. And that's one of the reasons I was saying it might take some time. So we need to look at options as to whether we get independent persons on the board, or people who we can then hold accountable, if I can use those words. But there are some terms and conditions in the articles, the shareholder agreements, as to who can be placed on the board, and we are looking at those carefully. So yes, the short answer is it is quite difficult, because the authority is the parent company. Yeah, that's my answer to that. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, can I just come in on that? So I think there is a distinction to be made. The review was about the visibility and the oversight that the combined authority have over the subsidiary companies. I think it does say that in the report that actually what's happening in the companies themselves is that there is regular financial reporting and performance reporting. There are regular board meetings. They are all attended. We have a company secretarial service now that provides minutes. They take minutes and make sure now that all statutory requirements are fulfilled in terms of making filings with Company House. We're currently going through the end of year accounts with the auditors who, and it's not EY, we have independent separate auditors for that who also do our corporation tax. So it's not necessarily that the companies themselves are not being managed properly and as you would expect a company to be managed. It's just that the reporting to the combined authority itself is not where it should be. So just to clarify that point.
I thought that was quite a gloss on an unsatisfactory situation, John, but thank you. I did talk with, it's not with us today, but Mark Parkinson, who is the interim director of corporate services. And he contacted me before we had this report and said, would we give him some breathing space? And I think his intention is rather more than just the updates that Edwina was talking about, that he undertook with me, and I hope the officers are still in that position, to provide us a full and proper management update at our next meeting in December, because it seems to me that there are financial and reputational risks, and it seems to me that it goes to the heart of the point of the improvement plan about efficiency and effectiveness of the organisation, because we have debated this on a number of occasions. It has been a bit like hen's teeth. It's good to know that, as far as we're aware, that the advice we have is that within the companies they're operating is in accordance with their legal requirements. But I think we do need a report that shows how is the combined authority now managing this? What are those arrangements? What are their key concerns? And when will it be fixed? And bearing in mind the sort of legal issues that Edwina referred to in regarding appointing of directors, and how they're progressing in response to the recommendations from the internal audit. So I'd ask officers to provide us with, we don't need thousands of pages, but we do need, these are the ones, this is up to date, this is how we're going to manage it in future, and how this is how the Audit and Governance Committee can be assured that what needs to be fixed will be fixed, or is fixed. Did you have anything to say, Graham?
I was writing down 3 things to add to the recommendations, because the recommendations are simply that we receive things and we note things. I think we should add something fundamental about expressing our disappointment with the minimal assurance that has been provided. I think we should be proposing that this is highlighted to the board, the Combined Authority Board, if it's not already being done so. And then your comment about, and that we get a full update on progress against the various actions at subsequent meetings. So it's not just as simple as we've received and noted.
Thank you, Graham.
Yeah, so I just wanted to check is whether all of this governance architecture and work is proportionate to the scale and the scope of these companies' activities. So we see that Angle Developments East Limited is, in all to intents purposes, dormant. So do we need to be terribly worried about, there's just the governance of a dormant company? And then I look at Peterborough HE Property Company Limited and Peterborough R&D Property Company Limited. One is just a project, which will then manage its completed project. And the other, their role is to manage projects. So is there any reason why these two companies can't be merged into a single company? That's the question. So why do we need this? Why do we need to double up on the governance overhead, which is, it's a complex architecture and involves a lot of work and cost and expense. And then kind of like more fundamental question is, what is the added value of these company vehicles to the activities of the combined authority? So why are we here? Is the question.
I think it's very helpful. I think that's what we need in the report as well. So materiality, the need and the scope for closing them down or merging them. John.
Sorry, just to quickly answer those questions. So we do have 6 subsidiary companies currently. 2 of them are effectively dormant, which is the Angle Holdings Company and the Angle Developments East, which were originally set up to be kind of delivery vehicles for future housing programs. One of the companies is OneCam, which obviously members will be aware of that project, and that is again in the process of being closed. Of the other three, the reason why we've got separate companies is that they are well, two of them are a joint venture companies. So the other parties to, for example, the Propco One company, which is the Peterborough HE Property Company Limited, is the that oversees the building of two of the university buildings, and the other parties to that joint venture are Peterborough City Council and ARU. So we need a company in order to be able to deliver that. The second property company is a joint venture, again, between the Combined Authority and Photocentric. So again, we couldn't merge those two companies because there are different parties who are involved in those projects. And then the third one was set up in order to deliver, that's the growth company, to deliver certain deliverables that the Combined Authority is committed to do. And that is done through a consortia of other companies. So again, there are three different reasons why those companies were set up and have to be separate rather than to be joined together.
John, thank you. I think that's probably the most comprehensive insight that we've had, and I think this is the problem. We haven't had these things written down, and that's why we're asking for them. And I think if that information had been provided months ago in a way that the audit committee could see and we knew how it was being managed, we wouldn't be here today. So that's something that should go into the report that we get in December. We can't change this, or we will change this, or whatever the reasons, but an assurance that it is being managed, the whole range of this has been managed properly, and not, as we've heard many, and neither should we be interfering internally within the companies, as I know certain members would make comments about. Okay, I think this is we hear it's a very seldom that one has a minimal report. This is an area where councils around the land have had reputational risk. I think, and we have been flagging this up as an area of audit committee's concern for over a year. So I'd be grateful if officers in reporting back on the Audit and Governance Committee to the next CA board make the point that that we have had a minimal, no assurance in other words, and that we are concerned that despite having been asking questions in this area for over a year, that this has happened, and that we have asked for a full report on putting these things right for our next meeting. Are people happy with that? Was something to convey? Okay, thank you very much, because it is exceptional. Right, are we happy to move on? Review of the corporate risk register and risk register improvements, item 7. And Chris Bolton, are you there?
I am here, Chair. Hello again to everyone. Just to let the committee know, Adam Lickerish has just joined us on the call. Adam has been leading the
Chris,
Pathfinder risk exercise.
Could you improve the volume, please, if you've got more volume?
I will certainly try, Chair. How's that? Is that better?
I think you're going to have to shout.
Okay. Happy to shout, Chair. Good morning all, or good afternoon now. Adam Lickerish is joining us on the call. Adam's from RSM. So RSM came in.
I'm sorry, you're worse than you were when you started. So whatever button you press, could you unpress it and then keep shouting?
How about now?
Slight improvement.
Slight improvement. Okay, I'm not really sure what else I can do to up the volume. It's on 100%.
Okay, well then definitely project your voice.
I will certainly try, Chair. Adam has joined us on the call this afternoon. Adam's from RSM, who came in to do a risk pathfinder exercise, and a number of recommendations were put forward to the combined authority. So just to reiterate, the purpose of this paper is to provide the committee with an update with regards to the risk register, and also to inform the committee around some planned risk register training and risk appetite training, which will encompass all CPCA sort of programs and projects, and also running some training for A&G and a development session that's due to happen in December. I'd also like to just inform the committee around Park. I know we mentioned earlier in the committee around the role of Park, and also from the last meeting in July, the chair asked that a number of risks be added to the corporate risk register, including ones around member behaviour as well. So we'll walk through some of those. Okay, so to do some very brief background, given the time, the corporate risk register is populated by reference to individual project risk assessments and directorate risk assessments, and is reviewed by the executive team of the combined authority at the Park Committee. So any risks that arise or become significant will come from left field. We've seen some even, in the last week or so. They're escalated via the executive team meetings or the Park meetings. As I mentioned previously, Park is an internal officer group led by the programme office, incorporating the chief exec and executive team, and officers from constituent councils and suppliers attend the meeting as required. The meeting takes place each month, where all performance and risks are reviewed, part of the performance dashboard. And Chair noted your points from earlier around some of the work that needs to come back to this committee with regards to informing the committee of where performance and risk is being measured across the piece. As I mentioned earlier, RSM were asked earlier in the year to come in to do a risk management pathfinder exercise. The report was delivered. It was agreed upon last executive team back in May, and we talked about it briefly in this committee back in July. There was 9 actions put forward, or recommendations put forward. 4 of them are complete, have been implemented. There's 2 partially complete, and there's 3 still outstanding. What I would say with regards to the recent change in responsibility for recording and reporting on the risks, previously it was with the legal team. That's moved across to the programme office in the last couple of months. So we've tried to move at pace to improve the work that's going on with the risk register, particularly around the training, as we mentioned earlier, and particularly around making sure that training is available, not just the internal sort of usual suspects. With the earlier item, we'll also be training program managers from those subsidiary companies as well. So in Appendix 1, you've got the corporate risk register. Chair, you asked that the top 5 be compiled, so that's with the committee. Risk owners should be on the call today if you need sort of further detail or qualification around any of the risks. Equally, as I mentioned at the start, Adam's on the call and he can talk you through the Pathfinder exercise. Equally, he can go into a bit more detail about the training offer that's likely to happen. It should be kicked off October time. So, Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Can I just ask one before others? Whether it's my fault for not picking it up, but in the text, you say that an updated version of the risk register is in Appendix 1. We've got the 5 top risks, but I couldn't find the whole of the register. Should it have been there, or was that my not clicking the right button?
I don't think it was you clicking the right button. The instruction was to concentrate on the top 5 risks rather than all of them.
No, but I was just the
very
text,
happy to share with corporate.
The text said the top 5 risks and the risk register.
Apologies,
so
then
it's okay. That was a misunderstanding then, and I'm sorry if I misled you. In the risk register proper, is there anything about subsidiary trading companies?
Not at the moment. So there's you'll see from the sort of top 5.
No, you've just answered the question. That's fine. Right, colleagues, I'm sorry. I just wanted to get those 2 things before I open the floor to debate. Does anybody have any questions? Comments?
Chris, there seem to be quite a few red risks showing as residual score. And unlike in the RSM report, which talks about likelihood equals such and such, and whatever the other one is, a consequence but equals something else, that isn't included in this summary table. There are also various actions proposed and dates indicated, which will then reduce will they reduce to the target score, or will they reduce to a different residual risk score? And how confident is Adrian that the activities indicated here will deliver the reduction in risk that we're all after?
If I go first, Adam, I thought the scores have sort of come about or measured via the conversations with the risk owners. So, for example, if there's a finance one, or one with regards to strategy or audit lesson and so on, we'll sit down with the risk owner. We will estimate what we think the risk will be, likelihood, as you mentioned there, and come to, I suppose, an agreement between the risk owner to take back to Park, to the executive team, to say, okay, that's what we think, it should be measured at. So, how with, between likelihood and so on. What we also do is talk through what should happen after that. So, reality is, if we put these mitigations in place, and you can see lots of the sort of narrative there in the table, we expect if we put those measures in place, then it would be expected that we would score it again, and we would say, okay, well, what's the residual score? So once we've done all these measures, what will the score sort of go to? Now, on some of these risks, even with the mitigations, they're still very, very serious. So, the financial ones, one's talking around, the future viability of the organisation, member behaviour. So even if you do all those things, if potentially they're still red. Over time, we update them every month, so we expect to have the latest information on the mitigations, and then we'll make another judgment as, you know, as risk owner and programme office, but equally as an executive team as to where we feel the sort of direction of travel is going. So it's not, sometimes it's not a straight, okay, we put the mitigations in and that's going to work, you know, very quickly. It might be a case that it happens over time, and when we make the decision each month, we still, you know, when we make the score, it still could be read. But I want to sort of reassure the committee we come back to every month. It's not like previously, I think, you know, maybe this time last year where the register was there but was never actually looked at. It wasn't an active document. It wasn't live. Adam, there was a second part to the question.
Yes, I think, thanks, Chris. Afternoon all. I think a key part to this particular conversation is obviously around those actions being designed to reduce the score towards the target. And obviously, as Chris has referred to risk appetite a short while ago, that target risk score can be influenced by the organisation's appetite to risk in terms of where that should sit, because obviously not all risk can be eliminated or reduced to a negligible level. So that's the third dimension to that conversation, which we'll be working on over the next 8 to 10 weeks with yourselves and the leadership team. And then I think hopefully that will then provide another angle, if you will, but also point for discussion in terms of where that target risk score sits in the first instance and how practical it is to actually be achieved, and to make sure that actually that it is proportionate to the organisation's appetite to risk and also a desired level at which that risk should be sitting at. Hopefully that answers the question, combined with Chris's answer as well.
I have to say, I'm not sure, John, whether I understood all of that. I think the bottom line for me, Adrian, is are you comfortable with the way risk has been assessed at the moment? Is it going to reduce over time to something which is definitely acceptable? And maybe this is something for Gordon. We appear here to have got quite a few high residual risk scores, one of which is we haven't got enough money. Is that really important to us, or should we just note it?
Adam, did you want to answer the first part of that question around, do you have confidence that the measures, paraphrasing the question, that the measures that are put in place, the recommendations and changes are, is making sure that how risk is managed in the combined authorities heading in the right direction?
I would certainly say so. Obviously, I've been working on and off over the last probably 9 months in terms of providing advice and guidance on this, and I would certainly say that the risk register is moving in the right direction in terms of the way that the risks are captured and assessed. That will take time. It is an evolutionary journey, so to speak, and I think that once we get to a point where we've worked through that training and awareness piece, hopefully you'll see further improvements in the information that you're receiving. I think the fact that the risk is assessed and the control environment is understood in terms of what's currently in place to manage those risks is key, and that is one of the fundamental building blocks moving forwards to allow for future action to be identified against those risks. Just to pick up the red, I guess the number of red risks. Obviously, when these risks are assessed, it's done on an impact and likelihood basis. So you would look at the risk in the worst case scenario. So if the way we manage this risk failed and it materialised, to make sure that committees such as yourselves are aware of what that worst case scenario could be. The impacts typically will remain high, but we're looking at how we can reduce the likelihood of that materialising in the first instance. And I think a pragmatic approach to that assessment is always important in terms of making sure that how we manage that risk is prudent.
Sorry, just to pick up perhaps on the specific that you were asking about in terms of the financial viability or running out of money. I guess one of the things that perhaps it's not very clear from here is in terms of proximity to a risk turning into an issue. So, for example, we have gain share, which is the core funding for the organisation, which is £20 million per year. Obviously, inflation at the moment is at 10%. So, £20 million now is going to buy us a lot less than it is in 25 years' time when we come to the end of our devolution deal. So we have got a balanced budget for this financial year. We've got a medium-term financial plan which takes us through the next 4 years. We're developing that for next year. We're very aware that we have some funding streams which we are using for current delivery which are coming to an end. So that needs to be replaced. So whilst we're going to be able to keep going for the benefit of the auditors in terms of going concern over the next year, we should be okay. But long term, we certainly need to look at where we're going to get additional funds from and how we're going to pay the core costs. And there are a number of different options, obviously, that we've been looking at. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. You mentioned the training, the development session. Have we got that in the diary, or are you going to fix that?
I've contacted Joanna to arrange dates or convenient dates. So it's all in hand, but we haven't confirmed the date yet. Okay,
thank you. And I'm sorry if I cause confusion between the 5 highlighted risks and the full risk register. I think we do need to have the full register available to us. I think perhaps what I found works a bit better is if the narrative lists the 5 risks, the top 5 or 6 risks, and our job is to, as an audit committee, is to be assured that the risk register is functioning and is active within management, not just the people who are the guardians of it. So it's always useful to include the ups and downs, the number of new risks, the number of old risks, or the ones dropped off, and the movement of risks over time, because I've always found that helpful from a management point of view. That shows that you're not doing what in some organisations they think they've managed the risk by putting it on the register. So if maybe the narrative could include some of that helps when you're trying to go through this mass of paper. Now, on the subsidiary, I've been having a day on subsidiary companies, and we've just had a minimal assurance, i.e. no assurance from an internal audit. I would have thought that would have been on the risk register, because if there might be, there's financial materiality, but there's also reputational. So I'd encourage you to ponder later and find out who should have told you that this was a problem, and why wasn't it on the risk register. Because it's very hard to, each area and each project will have its own risks. But what you're trying to do, what we're trying to do, what the board needs is that corporate strategic stuff. And I might be over labouring this one, but I think the reputational risk, regardless of any materiality, is something that should have appeared on your register. So maybe you can go and scour the woods and find out why that didn't happen. Okay. We were asked to note the improvements of the risk register and note the planned training. Are we happy so to do? Okay, thank you very much both. You keep getting beaten up, don't worry. Oh, sorry,
Thank you, Chair.
we've got a thought on the stairs.
Sorry, before we end, this is a matter which attracted my attention. This is on page 105. It's number 6, of the RSM challenges, and it relates to the lack of risk management expertise within the organisation, which I found quite surprising. And the suggested action is that consideration be given to acquiring the specialist risk management expertise, and it's in the action plan for on the roadmap on page 9 of the report, page 107 of our agenda for Q2. And I was just thinking, well, have we been able to do risk management without someone who's got senior expertise in risk management in the organisation? And shouldn't this be a really urgent matter to be attended to?
Would somebody like to? I don't know whether.
Chair, I'll take that question.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think it's a very valid point. When we first undertook the Pathfinder exercise, as Chris has alluded to, the risk management responsibility sat in a different part of the organisation, which didn't necessarily have the experience and capability to facilitate the risk management framework effectively. That subsequently, obviously, we're now in September, and there was a movement of where that risk management responsibility now sat, obviously with Chris in the PMO, so which has more risk management expertise to be able to facilitate the framework. Chris may have something to add, but I wouldn't say that is now as big a concern or issue as it was when we first undertook the review back in, I think we started in perhaps December last year, pre-Christmas, and completed it over the course of January, February. So I would probably think that has moved on now.
Happy to jump in there, Chair, if it helps.
Yes, please.
Yeah, concur with Adam, really. You know, the move across into the programme office is moving into an area where there's an awful lot of experience around the management risk, you know, from myself down through all my staff. One of the reasons for getting the sort of training or lining up the training for the organisation and the programme managers is that we're not confident that it's out there in the rest of the organisation, and as noted in the internal audit report, in the subsidiary companies. So we're rectifying that issue. Just in addition, just to sort of touch sort of back earlier in the committee where we were talking about the improvement plan. Also, as part of the improvement plan, particularly the performance management theme, we're also looking to do a corporate accreditation for the organisation with regards to programme management, including risk. So we recognise there has been an issue previously, and you know, with some of the actions that hopefully we're sort of imparting today, we can assure the committee that all these actions are in hand.
Thank you. Thanks very much, both. Till next time.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
So we come to item 8, which is the work programme, which we're going to have a full relook at next time. So we don't need to say any more at this juncture.
Very quickly, Chairman, we've been promised a social media protocol on a number of occasions now, and one, I haven't seen it, and two, I don't see it in the work programme.
The man on my right has the answer.
Yeah, we were tasked with coming back to this committee in January with outcome of revising the code of conduct, member officer protocol review, and to incorporate at that point the social media protocol. I can assure you that work is going on in the background. Only this week I've been at another combined authority reviewing their approach to it, which has included code of conduct and social media protocol. But it's that will all be reported in January.
Thank you. I think on the work programme, sorry, was it another?
Yes, in which case, the January, which is shown as the reserve date, we are going to be using, are we? Because I'm going to be away, so I'll need to find a sub.
Yes, I think the answer, isn't it? Yeah, I think, thank you. I hadn't realised that there was any doubt we will meet in January because the volume and the timing, I think, I mean, how long we spend in the meeting is up to ourselves in some respects, and the chair stops talking, that will save some time. But I think we need to assume 3 hours. And I would encourage members to, when you approach for development sessions, to do your best. When I know your diaries are much more complicated than mine. Okay, thank you. That takes us to item 7, which is the date of our next meeting, which is Friday the 2nd of December at 10 o'clock in this very room.